Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Today we're looking at some, frankly, harrowing reports coming out of Gaza. It's a really tough situation, and we want to try and help you understand what's been happening based on the information we have.
It really is a somber topic, but it's essential we look closely. We'll sift through the details, focus on the facts from the sources, and what it all means for the people actually living through this.
Okay, let's get into it then. We're talking about Saturday, July 19th, 2025, a specific devastating incident. What do the reports tell us happened?
Well, the immediate thing that jumps out is just the tragedy of it. Accounts say Israeli troops opened fire near crowds of Palestinians, people trying to get food from aid hubs in southern Gaza.
Open fire.
Yeah. And witnesses, hospital officials, they're reporting at least 32 people killed.
32. Just trying to get food. That's staggering. Tell us more about these food distribution places. They're not the usual UN ones, are they?
No, they're not. These particular sites, they're run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. And this is interesting because, well, they only started up in May.
Relatively new then.
Very new. And backed by the U.S. and Israel. Their stated aim, publicly anyway, is to replace the UN's system. They claim Hamas diverts UN aid.
Which the UN denies.
Which the UN strongly denies, yes. And maybe the most crucial detail here, is that these 4 GHF sites, they're located inside military-controlled zones.
Inside military zones. So that immediately adds a whole different layer of risk, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It fundamentally changes things for anyone trying to get aid there.
Right.
Raises questions about neutrality, access. It's a very tense setup.
Okay, so that background is critical. Now let's talk about the conflicting stories around this specific incident. Gaza authorities say 32 shot dead. What's the Israeli military's account?
Right, this is where it gets complicated. The Israeli army says they fired warning shots. They claim a group approached troops near Rafah overnight, ignored warnings to stop, and that the distribution site was actually closed then.
Closed at the time, okay. And GHF, the aid organization itself?
GHF says nothing happened at or near their sites. And they also point out they've repeatedly warned people not to come looking for aid overnight or early in the morning.
So, stark differences. Warning shots versus direct fire. Closed site versus people gathering. But then you have the people who are actually there. The witnesses. What are they saying? This is where it gets really human, isn't it?
It really is. Their accounts are just harrowing. One man, Mahmoud Mokaimar, he described walking with crowds, mostly young men. He said troops fired warning shots first, but then just opened fire indiscriminately.
Indiscriminately.
Yeah. He saw at least 3 people motionless on the ground, saw many others wounded, fleeing. Another witness, Akram Aker, he claimed troops used machine guns mounted on tanks and drones.
Tanks and drones.
That's what he claimed. Said they basically encircled the area between 5 and 6 a.m. and fired directly into the crowd, leading to, many casualties.
Between 5 and 6 a.m. That timing seems important given the GHF warning about early morning travel.
It does. And then there's Sana Al-Jabari, her words, they just cut right through. She asked, is this food or death? Why? They don't talk with us, they only shoot us.
Wow.
She was holding up her empty bag. It says everything about the desperation, the fear.
Is food or death? That's incredibly powerful. It really grounds the whole thing in human suffering. And the aftermath, the medical situation for the survivors, what do the sources say about that?
It sounds like chaos. Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, they reported getting 25 bodies from this incident. And 70 wounded people.
70 injured on top of the dead.
Yes. And Dr. Mohammed Seker, he's the head of nursing there, told the Associated Press that most of the injured were shot in the head and chest.
Head and chest.
He described the situation as difficult and tragic, said they have a severe lack of medical supplies, people being treated on the floor, including a child.
On the floor.
Yeah, there is even this image described, a young boy just patiently holding a blood bag for someone lying on a stretcher. It's just
heartbreaking.
It really is. And the sources also mention another 7 people killed, including a woman in a different area, Shakush. That was north of another GHF hub in Rafah.
So this wasn't entirely isolated, even in terms of these specific aid points. And stepping back further, this terrible incident, it's happening against a backdrop of ongoing violence across Gaza, right?
Exactly. It's not happening in a vacuum.
Yeah.
The sources point to other deadly strikes around the same time. 2 people killed in Gaza City. An airstrike hit a tent where displaced families were sheltering.
A tent.
Yeah. Al-Auda Hospital reported 12 killed in central Gaza. That included a police official and his family, 2 children, an infant, 5 women among them.
An entire family.
It seems so. And there were more strikes reported Barej, Sel al-Din Street, Sheikh Radwan, Tal Hawa, more casualties, including children. The Israeli army itself acknowledged striking around 90 targets across Gaza that day. It paints a picture of, really widespread conflict.
90 targets in one day. It helps listeners understand the scale. So for people trying to grasp the bigger picture, remind us of the overall context. How did this latest phase of the war begin, and what's the human toll been like?
Well, as most people know, this phase of the war was triggered by the Hamas attacks on October 7th, 2023. Around 1,200 people were killed in Israel and 251 taken hostage.
And the hostage situation now?
50 hostages are still held. Tragically, it's believed less than half of them are still alive. And on the Palestinian side, the numbers are just devastating. The Gaza Health Ministry, which it's worth noting is part of the Hamas government, but its figures are generally considered the most reliable by the UN and others.
Okay.
They report over 58,000 Palestinians killed since the war began. Over half of those are women and children. 58,000.
The scale is almost unimaginable. With such a terrible cost on all sides, are there any serious efforts being made to stop the fighting? Any signs of progress?
There are talks, yes. Ceasefire negotiations have been happening in Qatar between Israel and Hamas. But the reports indicate no real breakthroughs lately. International mediators are involved, but it seems stalled.
Stalled? But the pressure must be immense.
Oh, absolutely. You see it in Israel, for example. There was a weekly rally in Tel Aviv. Afrat Machikawa, she's related to one of the hostages who was released. She spoke very powerfully. She said, after 652 days, it is time to do what is right for Israel. Bring all 50 hostages home and end this war.
And the war.
That was her call. And thousands marched to the U.S. Embassy branch there, too, demanding a ceasefire. So the pressure is definitely there, both internally and internationally.
And while Gaza is the epicenter, the tensions are obviously spilling over. Your sources mentioned something significant happening in the West Bank, too.
Yes, that's right. It's another sign of how volatile the whole region is. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, usually, a very strong supporter of Israel, he visited a Palestinian Christian village called Taiba in the occupied West Bank. Yeah. Residents there reported that extremist Israeli settlers had set fire to the Church of St. George earlier in July. And Ambassador Huckabee condemned it very strongly. He called it an act of terror and a crime.
That is strong language, especially coming from him in that context.
It is, and it highlights the surge in settler violence in the West Bank that's been happening since the Gaza war started. Palestinians say the Israeli security forces do little to stop it, and settlers rarely face consequences. So Huckabee's condemnation, it's quite notable.
It really underscores how the conflict radiates outwards. So bringing it back to Gaza and that scramble for aid, it seems the search for just basic survival for food is caught right in the crosshairs of the conflict. What's the main thing that strikes you that you think listeners should really consider from all this?
I think it's the sheer vulnerability. You have civilians desperate for food, pushed into these situations near military zones, near these new, somewhat controversial aid distribution points, and then tragedy strikes. It really highlights the incredibly thin line people are walking between survival and death.
A thin line.
Yeah. And it makes you question, how humanitarian aid itself can become tangled up in the conflict dynamics when the very act of seeking help becomes so dangerous. What does that say about the state of the crisis? It's not simple. It's deeply complex and just profoundly human and tragic.
That's a powerful thought to end on, the complexity and the human cost. That brings us to the end of this discussion on the Global WarWatch Network. Thank you so much for joining us as we try to make sense of these really critical and often heartbreaking issues.
Yes, thank you for listening. Your engagement really does matter. We hope you'll like, share, and subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network to stay informed.
And we genuinely want to hear what you think. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. You can also find us on social media. All the links are right there in the description. Thanks again for tuning in.